if I just quickly have to remind the same, that there are three things which are interrelated: economic, political, and legal system. Then we have been through the three things which talk about what are the types of economics. Then we talked about the planned market mix economy. Then we have been through the political system. Then we talked about that which one would be having the freedom or which one would be having a less freedom. Then we were talking about the separation of power. And then after the separation of power, the reason of the separation of power was that to avoid the too much power in a one hand. Okay. Then we've been through the legislation, execution, and judicial. So all of these three division would be having three different set of activity which need to be done, and those three once those three are divided, so that does mean that different people are part of it and they are taking charge of it, and they are going to be they will try to make the process unbiased. Siddhant, you were not there in the class yesterday or the last class, so these are some definition which I have just wrote it down. Would it be okay if you just take the screenshot, or I have it taken for the same? Hello.
Yeah, I'll go through these.
Sure. Thanks. So basically, the PDF which I have shared with you will not be having this definition because I was just referring it again and I was studying for the or preparing for the class. So these are certain things which I found out and will help you out throughout the course. Okay. So just go through it once. Then we have been through the criminal and civil law. Then we were talking about uh, the different set or the different characteristic of the book. Ultimately, this is an important topic, and I want you to study this with full attention because you can expect 2 to 3 questions coming out of this chart only. Okay. Then we've been through what is in conflict of law, which is going to be the connecting topic of today's class that we're going to proceed with. Then we saw that what are the sources of law. Then we were having a discussion about that international treaties and conventions, customs, general principle of the law, and how they're going to affect the common law. Then we were talking about the legislation, like legislation. So basically, this is delegated legislation, the process where the parliament is giving the authority to some other party where they make the law. Okay. Was there any doubt that you wanted to say, look or have a clarification on, or we can move ahead? Then these are certain good rules, and expect 2 or 3 can be asked from this area. Okay, these are the area among which you will always see a question, no matter when you're going to sit for the exam. So always remember, this is again an important area. If I just mark the important area of this chapter, Doctrine of Judicial Precedent. Okay, this they might ask you one question from the UK judiciary, but chances are very less. But legislation, delegation, a question would be there. Single question would be there if there would be any. This is again an important topic area. Conflict of law could be there. Sources of could be there. Again, this is an important area. Okay. Fine. Separation of power again. So I think what I can see, the presentation that we have or the file that we have has compiled with important area, because ultimately the syllabus is less, so the possibility of testing everything is huge, because I have seen question around everything which is presented over here. So this is what making me to say this, that these are important area. But I've seen different set of the examples or different set of the topical areas which are examined very frequently, so I have marked them. Now I will just start with the next chapter that is supposed to be the today's topic, and we will start with the international law. Okay. Now, Siddhant, would you like to pay attention or light on this? Like, what can be the reason that we're going to study the international law, or what are you going to, what you can able to think, like what can be the portion or what can be the side of the law that we're going to study, or why are we going to study the international law? Is there anything that you know about it or like to guess about it?
So we'll study the international law because it's important. It's what regulates trade and other activities between countries. It sets common laws and rules for everyone to follow.
Hmm. So, as an individual, or when we do say the global law, even if we're not talking about the global law as a topic, but when you look around having a transition into the international markets, you are going away from one country boundaries or territories to another countries, right? So that how you are meeting to into the global market, right? Hana? So this is
Yes.
again a topic that is related to the conflict of law, because ultimately the trade law would be different in India. The trade law would be different in the other country that we are having a transition into or with. Okay. But one thing to look after is that both are making a transaction, so there will be some term and condition that both parties are agreed. But there will be some of the some term and condition. One country would be saying that you have to follow mine, other country would be saying that you have to follow mine. So there isn't the possibility of the chance of conflict, right? That need to be taken care of, that need to be removed. So in that scenario, we need to require the international law, because ultimately you are having a transaction into the global market. When you know that one party is saying something else, when other party would be saying something else, and both would not be able to find a medium, in that case you need a mediator or something that who would be helping as a mediator, or would be trying to resolve the dispute between the two parties. Yes or no? So in that case, because the market is the international market or the global market, so there is an international law. Now, international law itself will not be helping out. The international law has different bodies which basically regulates. Okay. Now, so whosoever is taking a transaction or making a transaction into the global market, they have to go through with the strict procedure, or basically they have to regulate in accordance with what is the international law. So the law which has been provided, every individual who is making a transaction has to regulate, or has to be in accordance with the in regulation with the international law. Okay. Now, there will always be a body who is going to monitor that whether the companies are, or the countries are going to follow, or whether the countries are following the rule and regulation that they're supposed to do. So basically, this is the concept that international law will be there, because this will work out as a mediator in order to resolve the dispute which is arise, because there are the two different countries and they are the two different set of the rule and trade rule which need to be followed. So those trade rule will not be going to be influenced, because ultimately if one country would be following the trade rule of other country, so in that case they might not able to present something or something legal in to their country. For example, suppose there is one thing. For example, we are taking the example of China and we are taking the example of India. Okay. Hello. It could possible that there
Yes.
might be some rule and regulations. Hello. It could possible that there are some rule and regulations in both of the countries for one of the product, right? For example, there is an XYZ project which can be sold in China as commercial, right? Commercial means they can be sold to the end customer, okay? But or the China basically take these goods from the India, but India has a policy to sell this product to business only. Okay. So India has a project XYZ which says that in India itself they will going to be sold this product to the business only. This cannot be sold to the end customer, means the individual's customer or the consumers, right? Now the China or India, when they're going to enter into the contact, it could possible that this might be the conflict. This might be the reason of the conflict, right? Okay. Now both these two go to the international rule and regulation bodies, right? Basically the international law which is regulated and managed by somebody, or probably the one who is looking after the trade over that region. Now in that case, India would be saying that I have a policy that this product cannot be sold to the consumers, when China would be saying that this product is something we brought only just to provide to the customer or to end users. Now in that case, the international law says that, or for example, we are taking a hypothetical example. So now in that case, the law or the international law might be having a clause which says that it is okay if India is not selling this product to their individual customers. They are just selling this or making a sale to the business. This is possible, right? But this is a policy they cannot imply on the China or the population of the China, but whenever the China is dealing with the customers. So there is a clause where it says that it is true that India can only sell this to the consumer, but this is only applicable to the boundaries or territories of the India. This law is not applicable to the boundaries or territories of the China. So in that case, there are the two possibilities. The clause international law might say to the India that before getting into the contact, it is possible for you to stop the contact and do not proceed with the contact. Okay, this is something you can go or ahead if you want your product do not go to into the customer or the consumer hand, because there are some product which basically should not be spreaded across the consumer. Something might be a defense one or something like that. Okay. Now, that India would be having two options: either to cancel the product, or basically do not imply their industry or basically in their the policies of the Indian country into the boundaries or territories of the China. So basically, the international law has came up as an mediator or mediator where they are facilitating the option or the possibilities of making the contract fulfilled, or at least making the both side of the obligation fulfilled. Either the contract would be cancelled or either the contract would be fulfilled, where the India would have to agree on that. The China would be selling this product to their different consumers. Is it okay? Is there any doubt that you would
Yes.
like to look after on this example? Although this was an hypothetical example, but I mean to convey the role play of the international law would be there when there isn't difficulties or there isn't a conflict. And in order to address that conflict, the international law would be presenting their clause, which will be equal or which will be unwise first of all, but which will be facilitating completion of the contract, or basically this will resolve the conflict whatever it is. So, okay. Hello.
Yes, sir.
There is one thing uncentral. You will be learning about that inside today's lecture. And there is one thing about the World Trade Organization. So these are basically the organization which look after the trade and regulations. So whenever this is going to be happen, so the World Trade Organization or their sub parties or so their sub bodies will be looking after that. Okay. So this is basically just to brief you about like what is an international law, and by the chance we have understood the international law. So here we will be learning about what are the other sub bodies that basically rule around them, and what are the laws and that are presented, and basically what they're trying to promote or prompt through them. Now, the syllabus area or the chapter which is there, we will be learning few of the things. If we just talk about them, so they will be a requirement to understand the need for the international legal regulations. Okay, and this is because to fill the or resolve the conflict of interest, right? Because ultimately, if you're going to, because there is a conflict, and in order to resolve the conflict, there is an international legal regulation that both of the parties has to follow. When I was talking or very vocal about that, there are some clause which will be applied by the international regulation or law body. So those clause basically are nothing but the rule or legal regulation of the international law. Okay. So we will be learning about what is the need for the international legal regulation, which you have understood in the context of the conflict of law, and explain the function of the international treaties, convention, and model law. Now I will just explain you what are these three things, but we will be learning about, first we will understand what are these three things, and then we will learn about what is basically the function of them. Then we will learn about explain the role of international organization. This will include such as UNCENTRAL, the ICC, that is International Chamber of Commerce, then World Trade Organization and OECD. Then UNIDROIT and UNCENTRAL, the court in the promotion and regulation of the international trade. And then you will be learning about the arbitration process. So this is chapter will be there in your probably in the section A. The possibility of coming this chapter in your single section A would be higher, where they will be asking you a simple line, or they might be asking you a different set of the knowledge area, different set of the terminologies. Okay. When I talk about what are the treaties, which we have already discussed in the last class, but still just to give the reference. So treaties is basically the written agreement where the countries promise to follow the same rules. Okay. So whenever can I say this, treaties are basically the term and conditions on which both the parties are agreed. Okay. Hello. So whenever there is in conflict, when the both parties would be putting their term and conditions, so there will be an agreement of that those term and conditions. Once those term and condition are written, or when they are become the sale rules of any contract, those will become as duties. Okay, these are the written agreement which where countries promise to follow the sale rules. Okay, there is one more example I can give over here, that treaties would be having one more thing. Suppose country A, country B. Okay, some rule of the country A will be followed, some rule of the countries B will be followed, and some of the international laws will be followed. Okay, hello.
Yes, sir.
So this is basically when they are agree on the process of following up the contract. It would be including what are the term and condition. It would be including what are the fair rules. Okay. Now there is one more thing I want to know. I want to ask where the possibility of conflict would arise when there are the two different set of the rule, or whether both parties are pushing it that my rule should be followed. Where the possibility of conflict would arise when the
When both
parties
are
are
pushing,
yes, please.
when both are pushing for their rule to be implemented.
Huh. There's okay, wonderful, Siddhant. Just to the interlink to this point, there's one thing that I would like to clear on this point. Like you have said that where the both parties are putting ahead that my rule should be followed. Otherwise, if both parties would have a separate rule, so they can agree on point, agree on a fact that some rule will be mine, some rule of yours, and where there is in conflict, we will follow the international law. Okay, so it could possible when we are having a transaction or when we are having an international transaction, so we might follow some of the rule of own country. Is it possible or not? Hello. Is it possible that we might
Yes,
follow huh, okay, but ultimately those rules should be in line or should not be against to the international law. The possibility of following own country rule will be only there when those are not against to the what international law says. Okay, hope you remember the example of
yes,
India. India has a policy that they cannot sold those products to the individual customers, but international law was saying this, that this is the policy which you have for your own country. This cannot be become applicable to other countries because you do not have any right on over their territories. Either you can cancel the contract or either you can allow this to do. Okay. Now the international law come into the place where the country or the India specific law was not in line with the international law. If your Indian law for the same example would have been saying this, that I would allow this product to be sold to the different consumer. In that case, would international would be coming or not? It would not be coming because ultimately both does mean the same thing, Anna. Okay. So have you understood that the
yes,
possibility of applying the own country rule will limit itself when it is against or when it is different from the international law. International law will come only when there is a conflict and when the countries which they are arguing would be having a different set of the rule or policies which are against or which are different from the international law. Done?
yes,
Then we have a conventions. So this is basically the treaty formed at international meetings to set the common global standards. Okay. Then model code or model law, basically it's a suggested legal framework that countries can use as a reference. The model, okay, prototype something. Codifying is basically turning unwritten or skirted legal principle into the single written law, consolidating law, merging multiple existing law or unwritten or skirted legal law. And these are basically coming from your previous case laws, okay? And these are basically written or from the parliament law. So do you know what is a law which is made by the parliament? It will be known as a statute, right? And this will be known as a legislation. The law which are came out of the case, it will be known as a came out of the court will be known as a case law. Okay. So the codifying law is basically when you are accumulating the case laws. Okay, it could be unwritten or it could be the different case laws, and we are just adding together. The reason of adding together is that the nature of the case or the nature of the topic is same. Okay, consolidating law is basically the law, the different set of the law, the different set of the actions act are there by the parliament and we are implementing them. Okay. For example, see. Hello. So act is basically the
Yes, sir.
rule, a law, statute. Okay. Okay. Inside the act, you will see different sections, different clause. So these are nothing but they are sub part of law. Okay. So when I just take the different sub part of the law and array together them and make the act, and those sub part are basically nothing but the previous written law or the existing law made by the parliament. Okay, in that case, those will be known as in what? Those will be known as in consolidating, the process of consolidating law. Because I think you have done your F7 paper. So in that, there is a process of consolidation where you do add together of the financial statement. So consolidating law is basically you are adding the different set of different section of the law where you, because ultimately the reason why we are adding this, because the nature or the topic of the law or the concern is the same thing. Other thing that you have to look around is that, okay, so now you know what is a codifying law and consolidating. Is there any doubt on this area? Hello, guys. Would you like to ask anything over this?
Yes.
The definition which I've presented. Yes, please proceed with that.
No,
No,
sir.
None. So what is the difference between codifying and consolidating law, Siddhant?
Could you repeat the question, sir?
What is the difference between codifying and consolidating law?
So the difference between case law and legislative law, right?
Yes.
So one of them is passed by parliament and then it is like it becomes a statute or it becomes a law in that way. And the other one is case law, which is like precedent that is set by the courts.
So this is basically the case law that we have, and this is by the parliament law. But Siddhant, there is one more thing that you have to clear about, that this is the process. These two are the process, okay, that define adding together different sections or sub part of law. Okay, when I do say the codifying law, so in that case I am accumulating the different case laws with the same topic, same nature. Okay, done. So what I'm doing, for example, there is an IT law. Okay, now the IT law would be having different set of what sections. Some would be talking about the computer security, some would be talking about the encryption, some would be talking about the softwares, right? Hello. So these are some different parts.
Yeah.
Okay, now for example, parliament has made a law on software. Now the parliament has made a law on encryption. Now the parliament has made a law on the computer security. Okay, now when you are adding all this together, and because these are made by the parliament and this has a nature of IT law, so they are going to be categorized as an IT law first thing, and once they are going to be categorized, so they will be making a full law or the proper law, and that law will be known as in which one it will know. It will be a codifying law or consolidation one. Will it be known as in the consolidating law or codifying law? The example I have said with you. Hello, Siddhant, Samvit, are you there?
Consolidated.
Hmm?
Consolidated.
Okay. And
Consolidating law.
the difference would be in the consolidating and codifying, that codifying is something where the laws or the sub part are coming from the case laws. So there is a process. For example, could it possible that a case comes to the court and court open the case and read it, and then they realize that no previous or existing law is there to deal with the case. Could it possible a case comes to the court where the court open or read the case, basically just listen that, and then they realize that there is a no existing of the previous law which is made by the parliament, would be dealing with this. So can it be a scenario where the case would be having a case, where the court would be having a case where there is a no existing law made by the parliament? Can it be a scenario in the real life or the practical life? I think yes, because ultimately most of the case you will see you cannot have a rule for everything. Okay. Hello. Siddhant, Samvit, are you there? Is there any issue that you're not able
Yes,
to
sir.
understand or something like that?
Yes, sir.
No.
Huh?
No.
So, all right. So it is very obvious that you cannot have a rule for everything that you are dealing. Okay. So it could possible that a court would be having because ultimately, if anything is happening, so you probably be going to the court, okay, with your application or with your appeal, where you would be saying that this is what has happened with me and now I want justice. So when you go to the court and when court understand your case and then they say there is a no existing law or the previous law which is there to deal with the case. So in that case, what they will be doing, they will be going to follow the Constitution of India. First thing. Second thing, once the case has been done, so there will be one outcome. Okay. So the case fact plus outcome will become a single case that will be known as a case law. Have you understood this, the concept that I've been very vocal about from the last two classes? What is the meaning of the case law? How does it arise? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this is basically the process of case law. So it could possible that a court would be listening or hearing to a case which they're hearing for the very first time. They have not seen anything happening like that in the previous. Because of that, the parliament would not be having a law. In that case, this is basically the process of case law, and this is what the case law known as. Now, when I do say about the codifying, so codifying is a process of acclimating those case laws. Okay, done. Hello,
Yes, sir.
understood? So I will be joining back the class again. After the break of the 5 minutes, we can start the class, okay? And then I will take you through the main things. It was just some brief of what are the things you need to learn from this chapter. I will be meeting you after 5 minutes, okay? So what is the time it is now? I will see you at 10:50. Is it okay?
Okay, sir.
Done.